Hi, Darren. Welcome to the Values Driven Talks. Darren is here because he represents the courage and the resilience needed to support all our PTSD veterans.
Yes, Darren has a very impressive story. He served in the military for 14 years. He was deployed in 2011 to Afghanistan. Darren has experienced several traumatic situations that he will be speaking about in this space. And today, Darren helps several veterans with PTSD, transforming his experience into lessons. Welcome to the show, Darren.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
So when we found out about you, we didn't know about all the experiences in the military. So can you give us like a brief summary about your life in the military?
Yeah, so I joined the army early 2007. I initially joined the infantry. 13 weeks into training, I tore my cartilage in my left knee, and that put me into holdover. And then while I was in there, I started to have the opportunity to start thinking about, did I really want to go in for infantry, or did I want to do something else which had more of a skill set that I could take outside of the military, later on. So I ended up leaving the infantry and then shortly after rejoining the Royal Engineers. So as a combat engineer, they do things like bridging, explosives, mine warfare, water supply, but things like that. That's your engineering background, but then you can also get a trade. And I already had 8 years in construction. So I was used to tiling, flooring, painting, decorating, glazing, all that kind of stuff. So I joined the army within the Royal Engineers as what's called a building and structural finisher, or BNSF. And that meant then I could take the trades outside that I did have and become qualified in the military. So I was doing tiling, flooring, painting, decorating, glazing, everything that I was already used to. But it's important to take note that when you go into a role like that, you are a soldier first. You always go through basic training, your soldier training, then your combat engineers training, then through into your trade. So that then gets used like on construction tours if there's anything that needs building or anything needs repairing, stuff like that. That's where you use that trade, right? So, I joined the army, obviously infantry, Royal Engineers. I then did 5.5 years in the army. I had time in Afghanistan. We went over Jordan, Oman, Cyprus, Canada, a few other places like that. And then after my deployment to Afghanistan, I came back 2012. I was an absolute mess. That's when the PTSD stuff came in that we'll talk about later. And while I was out, during that couple of month period of coming out, I couldn't cope outside. So I was like, I need to go back in. I just got to go back into the military. So I ended up joining the Navy as a diver, as a mine clearance diver. Got injured 6 weeks on course, got an injury from water pressure, so it ruptured my sinuses and I couldn't dive. Then I transferred within the Navy to the Fleet Air Arm, which is where I became an aircraft handler. So I worked with all the aircraft refueling, launching and stuff like that. So that is my very quick overview about my military career, and it was 14 years overall.
Wow, that's impressive. You said when you joined the military, you have to go through basic soldier training, right? How long is that?
I think that was 14 weeks. So if I'd stayed in the infantry, the whole infantry training, I think it was 26 or 28 weeks. I can't remember. But it was around 6 months. But because I went through a different route into the Royal Engineers, they do a much lighter version of what the infantry go through because they're frontline combat, essentially just at the front line firefighting all the time. So we have to learn the basics of what they learn. And then from that point, then we go into our trade courses and stuff like that. But the basic training I went through the second time for the Royal Engineers was 14 weeks.
Great. So one of the first questions that we had for this interview was if you could share a pivotal moment in your life that led you to discover your core values.
Whew, God. So my core values, it's a difficult one because before the military, I was in a punk band for 9 years and I was like in the drug scene and all that sort of stuff. And when I joined the army, it was to get away from that. And I was trying to get away from, I was running away from my current situation because every time I tried to get out of the drugs, I would always get pulled back in. So I was like, I need to leave. So I joined the army to get away from that situation. But then it becomes something else. So once you get into the military and you pass basic training, you get to uni, then it's all about, how can I progress my career? And then from there, then, when you go on deployment to Afghanistan, it's no longer about your career or serving your country. It's about keeping your friends alive. Do you know what I mean? So like your values changes all the way through and your priority. So it's very difficult to say what my actual values are now, because I've got so many purely from my experience throughout the military, and even the Navy side, it's, you're looking after each other, making sure everyone's got their kit ready to go, and you got to be on time, and there's so much that goes on in a day-to-day scenario within the military that there's a lot of different values that take place within that period.
Wow. And being from that world, referencing drugs and wanting to get away from that world, why did you focus on the military? Because that's like a game changer. You really had the intention to leave those things behind when you focus on the military.
So I joined the army at 22, and when I was 17, my mum wanted me to join when I was 17 because my granddad was an ex-Marine. My uncle was Navy; he was an engineer in the Navy. So on my mum's side, there was a lot of military background anyway. And she knew I was in a bit of a bad situation. She wanted me to go, but at the time I wasn't ready. I was just like, I ain't going in the military. And I was very rebellious at 17. But when I started to get to like 20 years old, for like 9 years, I had like really bad dermatitis on my hands, like eczema. And I wasn't sure whether that, at the time I was working in construction, I thought it was caused by working with cement and dust. And I thought that's what was causing it. I didn't put it down to the drugs at the time. And then there was a period where I didn't take any drugs for 2 weeks, nearly 2 weeks. And my skin was almost healed within 2 weeks on my hands. And then one night I went out clubbing and taking ecstasy. And the next morning, my hands were back to how they were before, like all the eczema. So I was like, that's when I clicked straight away. The drugs are doing me damage. So that was the driving factor behind getting away. I was like, if I don't do something now, I'm probably going to be dead in 3 to 5 years. So I probably wouldn't have made it to 25 because we were hammering drugs big time. Ecstasy, coke, cannabis, speed, anything we could take, we were taking it. So I was never like a nasty person, never getting in trouble. We just took drugs to have fun. Do you know what I mean? And that was it. But yeah, it was definitely it was the health thing, because I'd already gone down the route of trying to get out a few times before, and it was messing with my kidneys and stuff like that. I knew I have to go. If I don't come, I'd already going
at a very young age, and it was already showing you in your hands and your kidneys the harm. So I think now I know why it's a very difficult question about your core values, because I can see a lot of values coming out of that. A person that leaves drugs behind has a lot of determination, has a lot of courage, and then not only having those values to leave that behind, but having the values to enter into a world which is basically serving. Those are another set of values that are big. So that first question is totally clear for me.
And Darren, do you think that during your time in the military, there was an event or someone that shaped that experience, that showed you, let's say, a value that you didn't know you had, and you recognize it when you worked or interacted with that person?
Yeah, so there was two guys I was really close to. One was a guy we called Tag. I won't mention the whole names because I don't know how much we can share with other people's identity, but one guy was called Tag, and another guy was Dave. And if he heard this podcast, he'd know exactly what I'm talking about. But Dave was very mentally robust. He was a good couple of years younger than me. But when I joined the army, he had already been in about 5 years. He was already a rank above. I think he's about 3, 4, 5 years younger than me. But when you met him, he's like, really mentally robust, really tough, really in like really good shape. He drank a lot, but he was always like, I don't know, he was just like, it was almost like if you met him, you'd think nothing could break him. He was just like the Terminator, man. He was just so mentally focused, determined. He would smash everything out. And with Tag as well, Tag always cared about others a lot. he didn't really care too much about the situations. He was so easygoing, and that's what I liked about him. But he was also really big and really strong. So when if you go on deployment to like Afghan or Iraq or anywhere where you end up going, that kind of guy could get you out on his own without any help because he was so big. He could just pick you up and carry you. And they're the two guys that I really loved in the army. And I keep in touch with Dave occasionally. We don't talk, we might talk every sort of 4 or 6 months, but when we do talk, it's as if there's never been a gap. So Dave helped me develop a more robust mindset for determination and grit. Definitely.
Wow.
And I think Carl helped shape my ability to not care too much about what's going on around me. Do you know what I mean? Because if you care too much, it gets on top, and then that's all you start to focus on. They say live in the moment, don't they? But if you live too much in the moment in a negative situation, you can't think of a way out. So they were the two guys that really shaped my personality in the military. Like, I was already determined and motivated as well, but yeah, them two guys are the guys I always hung around with, and they were both mountain bikers, and I was a mountain biker, and both, we all got on well with that. And we ended up 2012. We raced in France down the Mega Avalanche. It's a 30-kilometer downhill event in France, so we all ended up going there as well after Afghan. So
that's adrenaline at its finest.
Yeah, and we all ended up, funny enough, on the same IED search team in Afghan as well. So all three of us were on the same team. It's brilliant.
Wow. Now that you talk about that, I recognize the value from what you lived and from what you're doing now, and that's empathy. And there's a sad story to empathy, which I would love for you to talk to us about. And then there's a very positive side to empathy, which we're seeing now with your help to these veterans that have PTSD and how you're helping them. But the sad story is a story about the little girl that you met, and I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
I'll talk about the deployment as a whole quite quickly. So we deployed to Afghanistan 2011. I deployed slightly earlier because I was going out initially to help train the troops that were coming through. So I was doing what they call ground sign awareness. So it's like training people about where wires are likely to be hidden, like linear objects like fencing or down the side of roads. So I was trained in that, and I would help train the troops that were coming through ready to go out on the ground. So I was at Camp Bastion, the main base over there. And while I was there as what's called a battlefield casualty replacement. So if anyone got injured on the ground, it'd be my job to go and replace them. So although I was already in my team, I got swapped around with another guy who was in another team because he was with his best mate, but they were like a handful, so they couldn't manage them together in the same team. So they swapped me and one of the other guys round, and to separate them two because they thought they were going to be, too much to handle on deployment. But later on, Dom, who I was replaced with, he was the one that got injured, and I replaced him and ended up back in my original team. So it's funny how that worked out. But anyway, going through Afghan, once Dom had got injured and I went out onto the ground, we went through situations of, people getting injured and shot. We had Jimmy, who was injured at the same time as Dom. He lost both legs. Dom lost his right leg. We had a few other friends like Ryan. He leant down on an IED and it blew up in his chest and broke his ribs, and there was a lot of injury there. We recovered body parts of an infantry soldier called Rifleman James Steele. He died at the blast site. And these were all like loads of situations that you would think, we had like mortars coming in, small arms fire, like getting shot at with rifles. These are the things that people would think would really affect you. And to some people it does, but that I was so full of adrenaline back then that it didn't really have a major impact. I don't think it had an impact. But then the one job that we're going to talk about now is we were walking to do a job, and I can't remember what the job was. But when you're walking to a job, you're always in single file. You've got one guy at the front searching the lane to make sure it's clear to walk, and then your whole team are behind you in single file following that same path, and that's how you get from one place to another. And when we were nearly at the job, we all kneeled down in the field because they were trying to sort something out at the front, which is about 300 meters in front of me. And I was the last man at the back. And where I kneeled down, there was a little house and the family came out, and it was a dad and 2 kids, and the 2 kids were probably around like 3 to 5. I think the girl was about 4. And she came to me and she was trying to talk to me, and they speak, a completely different language. I didn't have an interpreter with me. So she was trying to talk to me, and I was like, I don't know what you're saying. And I could tell she was in distress because the way she approached, bear in mind there's 40 men here in full combat kit, and she's a little girl. So something's going on. So you have the courage to come up and talk. So anyway, she lifted her sleeve up and she had a septic arm, and it was from the wrist all the way to the shoulder, like full deep septic infection. So I was like she ain't going to make it. If she doesn't get, penicillin or some sort of treatment, she ain't going to make it, So I radioed ahead because we had a female doctor at the front, and I radioed ahead and said, look, we've got a young girl here who needs help. And obviously I didn't go into too much detail on the radio, and that's kind of what I blame myself for at the time, because I should have done more and that, all that sort of stuff. But I radioed ahead, said, this girl needs help. And then they just radioed back saying, I'll leave her there, we've got a job to do. And that was the trigger. That was where I just absolutely snapped, and I was like, I'm done with the army. So when we got back, that was all I could think about, was the fact that we'd left that girl behind, so that was the big problem for me. And then, I don't know, the doctor at the front didn't know the scale of what was going on, because I didn't explain the details of how bad the infection was. She was 300 or 400 meters ahead of us. She couldn't see what was going on. So she didn't really have enough information to make a proper decision. I could see what was going on, but I didn't really relay the information. But because I blamed myself for so long, someone said, for all we know, another team could have come through there a couple of weeks later, found her, and said, she needs medical attention, she might be all right. But you don't know that, see? So that's what was on my mind for 12 years. I struggled with that for 12 years. And I've got a 3-year-old daughter now. And this is why I had the breakdown recently, about 6-7 months ago. My daughter's 3, and she was approaching that age of that girl. And I had my PTSD under control for 10 years, something like that. And then one day it just all came back. Couldn't figure it out. Didn't want to be at home, and I was trying to work out what was going on. And then one day I was playing with my daughter, and I was like, Jesus Christ, you're the same age as that girl. And that was she was a constant reminder of that girl that we left behind, So that's what made it so hard. So that's the story about that girl in Afghan.
Wow.
And Darren, a question there about the PTSD, and how did you know at first that you had it? And how do you know now when it's coming again?
When you come back from Afghan, you stop in Cyprus for 24 hours. I don't know how long it is now, but they used to do 24 hours in Cyprus, and they call it decompression, and they just give you can have a drink, bottle of wine, beer, whatever, and they just sort of assess everybody. But the problem with that is you've literally flown out of Afghan to Cyprus, and now you're going to UK, right? So there's not enough time for your adrenaline to calm down. You're still pumped with adrenaline, so you feel normal. As long as that adrenaline's going, nothing bothers you. Even the girl didn't bother me. And when I got back to UK, it was about 3 months after. There was 2 situations actually that made me realise something wasn't right. And about 3 months later, I was starting to get a bit short-tempered. I wasn't physically aggressive, but I was starting to get snappy, and I didn't quite think anything of it, to be honest. And then me and my girlfriend at the time, we were walking the dogs. She had 2 dogs, and we were walking down this road, and there was a T-junction in the road, like a T-junction. And you go over the T-junction into the park, and that's where we walk the dogs. Well, we came to the T-junction, and I didn't see to the right-hand side. I didn't notice these 2 workers. They were council workers breaking up the road. And the jackhammers, the kangos, we call them kangos here, but they break the concrete with the big, pneumatic chisels. And they're really loud, and they're hydraulic powered. But I didn't see them, and they started using the drill. And as soon as they pulled the trigger, my brain went into thinking that was an AK-47 being fired, because it was, even though the sound wasn't the same as an AK, I didn't identify the sound straight away. But then at the same time, almost instantly, I realized it wasn't. So it was a real weird fast switch between the 2. Do you know what I mean? So that was one thing I was like, it real made me jump. And, things like, her kids at the time, if they were loud, I was getting anxious because of the noise, and I wasn't normally like that. And then one day I came to my dad's, and bear in mind, in Afghan, when you're on tour, like, everything has to be on point. Your admin needs to be squared away. You can't have food lying around because you get desert rats in your tent, and it's all got to be put in like tins, ammo tins and stuff like that. And I come to my dad's, and there was a basket of washings, something so simple, a basket of washing on the floor in the living room. And I was like, is that clean or dirty? And he said, I don't know. I was like, well, can get it washed and get it put away. And I snapped at him. And I was like, this isn't me. Like, something isn't right here. And that's when I started to realize, like, 3 months after the adrenaline started to calm down, I was starting to change in personality. And I didn't know it was PTSD for a long, long time. And, fast forward a good few years, when I joined the Navy, so I'd left the Army at this point, and I joined the Navy. Even the not being able to cope outside of the Army, I had to go back into the forces. That was another identifier that something wasn't right, because I was freaking out being in as a civilian again. I couldn't do it. And when I joined there, I came back on leave, and my granddad next door, he lives next door. So the neighbour came down and said, oh, your granddad's down on the floor. I think he's had a heart attack. So I run up there trying to give him chest compressions, helping him, and he died. So that sent me off the edge again. And then 5 weeks later, my other granddad died. And I was just like, it was just like this massive spiral. And I'd gone so deep into that hole. And I'd stopped eating properly, wasn't training, wasn't sleeping. I was dehydrated all the time. And I was just anxious, chest pain. I was a mess. And it wasn't until when I was in the Navy, I started having real bad heart pain. And I kept going to the doctor, and they were like, oh, we'll get you checked out. So I had ECGs, cameras down the throat, chest scans, x-rays, everything they could do, blood tests and everything. They were like, there's nothing wrong. I was like, there's something wrong. I'm not feeling right. And one day I phoned the med bay up, and I said, look, I'm in a lot of pain. Can I come up? And they said, well, we can't get you in today. Can you come at 8 o'clock in the morning? This was like 4 p.m. So yeah, I'll come in the morning. And the next morning I tried to walk to the med center on base. And I was in so much pain. I was sweating. I was walking so slow. I thought I was like going to die. And when I got to the doctor, he said, oh yeah, just lift your top up, and I'll check your heart rate. And I tried to lift it, and I just broke down crying. Like, I had a meltdown. And he was like, you're suffering with anxiety. Like, that's what it was. And they started looking into that, and they started to realize I got PTSD from Afghan. I told them about the whole history. All the struggles that I've been through over the last, at the time, 8 years, probably 7, 8 years. And they were like, yeah, you got PTSD, depression, anxiety. So that was it. So it took years before I actually got diagnosed.
How do you make sure that you don't go back, that you keep yourself healthy, emotionally healthy?
So until my breakdown recently, before I got hypnotherapy, I just didn't talk about it. Didn't talk about it at all. And there was a time, remember when Russia hit Ukraine a couple of years back? 2 or 3 years ago now it was. When that was going on, that didn't really bother me. But my friend who I speak to online, another Dave, he said, oh, what do you think about this Ukraine and Russia thing? I was like, to be honest, I don't really think about it. Because if I do, I'll probably go into a bit of a black hole again. And he said, oh, do you mind if I ask a few questions about your time in the military and Afghan? And as soon as I started talking to you, I was like, PTSD level 10 again, and depression, anxiety. And I was like, I can't talk about this, dude. I just said, I just can't carry on talking. So for so long, it was easier just not to talk about it. And I think that's why so many men, especially men, struggle with depression and stuff, because we don't talk. And when I had the breakdown, I came out on LinkedIn, so I've got quite a big following on LinkedIn. I came out on LinkedIn and said, this is what's going on. I'm struggling. I'm in a bad place, and put a video up. And then, Dan Martin, who was my hypnotherapist, reached out and he said, I saw your video. Do you want to go through hypnotherapy with us, no charge? So he offered it me for free. And it really helped. Massively helped, And it's like, it was only 2 sessions. I had 3. I got another one. But the second session fixed it all. Completely got rid of the PTSD. I don't struggle anymore now. But I think when I talk about it, I still get a bit choked up, because it's a little girl at the end of the day, isn't it? But it doesn't affect me anywhere near what it did. And now, to make sure I don't go back into that, I don't know. I don't really do anything because I'm so focused on my business. I got my daughter. I tried to get to the gym a couple of times a week. My diet could probably still be a lot better than it is. But I think the main thing for me now is trying to at least do 3 or 4 times a week meditation when I'm going to bed. I think that's the best way I cope at the minute to keep calm.
Controlling your mind.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book, The Power of Now, being fully present, and it's incredible. I just can't stop. This morning I was stuck there. I had a meeting. I was just fascinated about what they're talking about in this book. And now that you talk about meditation, I don't practice meditation, but it's definitely something powerful, very healing.
The thing about meditation, just before you carry on, so I've got a friend called Bentley, and he was involved in a road traffic collision 20 years ago, and he was a lorry driver and he didn't cause the accident. It was a snow issue and the car was on his side of the road, but he ended up killing the girl in the car. And for 20 years he struggled. And I said, when I met him, I said, have you ever tried meditation? He said, no. So I said, try and do meditation. I said, I've got a point here, but I'm just going to explain. But the problem people see with meditation, a lot of them think it's a religious, tree hugging type hippie thing. And when people try to do meditation, the problem with meditation is when you first start meditation, 2 minutes feels like an hour. And you're like, God, I felt like ages. I've only been down 2 minutes. But once you get into meditation over weeks and months, what happens in an hour feels like 2 minutes. And when I got into meditation when I was in the Navy trying to fix my head, I would go out for 2 hours and it feels like I'd only just closed my eyes. But the only reason I would come out of it was I knew I'd stop breathing because I'd gone so deep. My breath, my distance between breaths was so long. I'd come out of it going, shit, I'm not breathing. So I'd have to come out for air and I'd snap back out. But then I'd come back round and I was so hungry because I burnt so many calories during that hour or two of meditation. So my frequencies had gone up. My natural vibration had gone up so high that I burnt so many calories and I was just eating all the time, constantly eating at that point. So sorry to stop you there. I just wanted to talk a little bit about meditation because I think a lot of people don't do it because they've got a misconception about how it works and how long it takes to get into it.
It definitely is powerful. Now that you were speaking about time in Afghanistan, I wanted to ask you a question that will probably lead me to another one. In these places, were you with soldiers from different countries or no?
Yeah, so most of the time on the ground, we would mainly be with UK troops. We would have on our patrol base, which is like a little base off the main bastion, like where are you based? You might have the Afghan army, the Dutch army, Canadian army, American army, or whatever, or Marines, or whatever it be. You'd always be coming across other forces. And even if you were on a base that was primarily UK, there would still be troops that would fly in, stop off for the night and fly out to another base, or, different commissioned officers coming in, seeing how we're doing things so they could take that to the Americans or the Canadians to try and make things better for them as well. So we used to mix with a lot of different troops.
That definitely leads me to my other question. So the first collection that we developed here in Values Driven is called Common Ground. And Common Ground basically expresses the universal language that all humans speak, which is our values. And inside this collection, we have values like trust, courage, gratitude. And I want to know from your perspective as a soldier, mixing yourself with soldiers from other countries, did you find values that were common ground between these people?
Yeah. So everyone that you come across there, especially if they are leaving Camp Bastion. So Camp Bastion is kind of like the safest, probably the safest base. And you've got, I think it's Leatherneck was the American base attached to it. that was like the safest place. You couldn't get near it. It was like, there was desert outside it for miles. You couldn't get near there. There's like Taliban or fighters or rockets around. You couldn't get near it. But once you go to a patrol base, you only had like, maybe 300-meter radius, a little fence. And then that was you with your tents and everything. And people could send mortars and all sorts into you. But when you're in those places, the patrol bases, it doesn't matter whether you speak the same language or anything. Like, everybody there is going to go out of that gate onto the ground, face the same stuff. The firefights, they're going to be getting into, the mud, the water, sleeping outside with the scorpions and spiders. So this is the thing, like, and everybody is feeling the exact same emotions. Everybody, even if you don't speak the language.
Wow, that's definitely a common ground. And yeah, it doesn't matter the language, it doesn't matter the religion. You're all facing the same challenges.
The only one that's a little bit different for some is certain cultures have a huge belief in their God and their religion. And they believe that if they die for a good cause, they will go to that heaven or whatever it be. So that has a slight different impact on courage, because you're going in without the fear of death, where other people are like, I'm married, I've got kids, I've got to get home, I can't die out there. So the courage levels are different. There's still courage in there, but it's a different kind of courage, because, like I said, if you're willing to die for your God and you don't care about anything apart from going to heaven, you're not scared of anything. You'll run across ground that hasn't been searched, regardless if there's a bomb in there or not. Do you know what I mean? So it's definitely the courage aspect is different.
Darren, and I've always been curious when you've been through those situations and you come to be a civilian and you hear these small problems from your friends, maybe from your family, how do you react? Because here empathy is challenging. You've been through the toughest situations. And now you're getting into someone that is telling you, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do with my rent. I'll need to move to another apartment. To be honest, that's a very simple issue to solve. So how do you react to those small problems, let's say?
As soon as you started asking that, I knew where that question was going, because I've had the same conversation quite a few times recently as well. And it's like with my girlfriend, she's like, oh, I don't know what shoes to wear. I don't know what, I need to do my makeup. I'm like, sod it, just put a hat on, get your shoes on, let's go out the door. I'm like, it's insignificant. Do you know? But like, the problems that you get as a civilian who's never been in the military compared to somebody, like, not all military see combat. We've got to remember that as well. There's different levels of military. Some will go into basic training, go to the unit and leave after 3 or 4 years, never even seen deployment. So there's different levels there. When you've been out to deployment on the front line, you've been in the firefights, you've had the casualties, you've seen death up front, that's a problem. When you come back, like, even like when people get, like your boss is going, oh, you're 5 minutes late, it's like, who cares? Like, I don't care. I just don't care. Like, stop bothering me. Yeah. And this is why I think so many ex-military who have served properly, I don't want to say properly because it's probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean? They've been in there, in the thick of it. This is why they struggle to fit into civilian life. Because another conversation I had as well recently was, civilians think they know what teamwork is. They don't. They can be the best team player on a team, right? But until you've been in war and you're patching people up, they've got bullet holes in them, they've got, you've got to get a casualty out there. Things like when you're in your little patrol base and one of your friends goes down with diarrhea and vomiting, so they're in bed, you've got to get their kit washed, you've got to get their weapon clean, you've got to get all their kit ready to go, you've got to make sure that they're hydrated, they're looked after. That's teamwork. You wouldn't, do you know what I mean? You wouldn't get that as a civilian. Maybe if you're like in medical, that's probably the closest you're going to get to it, like dealing with the casualties and people coming in. But most jobs, people do not know teamwork. They don't. And I know there's probably going to be people watching this at some point not agreeing with that. I know what teamwork is. I'm a great team player. I'm a team leader. Team leaders are great, but like team leaders out on the ground are making decisions in real time when there's bullets hitting around your feet. That's a team leader, when they can think that fast, and they are so 100% committed to their decision that they will face the whatever the consequences of that decision, they will face that later. But at the time they've got to make a decision. There's no time to hesitate. You can't hesitate. And that's a big thing with the military, So yeah, in terms of like what you just asked, how do I deal with small problems? I don't even think about small problems anymore. It's like, my girlfriend's like, "Oh, you're going to shower today?" I'm like, "No, I'll have one tomorrow." I don't care. I'm just like, I don't stink. I'm fine. I got more important things to do than mess about and worry about certain things, And yeah, I think that's why, like, relationships for me, I struggle, especially with like women. What lipstick should I wear? Let's just get out of the house. You've wasted 45 minutes and could have eaten by then. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm like. I just want to get things done now, get it done fast. But I think it also has a negative impact because, like with my girlfriend, I'm very not easygoing. I'll say I'm not nasty, but I'm not easygoing. Do you know what I mean? It's like if I want to get out of the house, I want to go in like 2 minutes we're going. I don't want to mess about with anything. So
Yeah,
you get men in general are like that. But now with the military on top of it, it's 10 times worse. Like so.
Yeah, I get the angle of Lissette's question, because what is a problem to the person next to you, for you, is not a problem, or could not be a problem. So, but I think the way that you addressed the answer was, at the end of the day, I've been through all these huge problems that I basically don't care, but the trigger was, that's basically the biggest struggle of people that have been in the military returning as a civilian, that sometimes they don't fit in. And that's exactly the representation of not fitting in, is you just go into another level. And that leads me to ask you the following question. Basically, you were in the military, then the Navy, and now you run a successful marketing business. And when I say successful, I want to concentrate on success. What values during your whole lifetime do you think have been key for your success on coming alive outside of the military, your success as a business owner in the marketing space? Do you have any values that you say, wow, these values have helped me be successful on these journeys?
Yeah. So first of all, there's always going to be courage, because I was in recruitment after leaving the military, and it took a lot of courage to leave that job and go all in with the business. Like, most people use that job as a safety net and they never leave. And then the business fails and they go, well, I'm not going to leave the job when I start my next business because that might fail. And the reason it's failing is because you're not going all in. So it takes courage to take that dive. You've got to have courage to start with. Then next of all, you've got to have discipline. And the reason I say discipline is because it's very hard to build a business off the ground from scratch and not be tempted or distracted by anything else. Like, there could be someone else who's starting a business and it's gone faster. Maybe they're in AI, and AI is this category at the minute which is growing fast. So they could build a business fast, but you've got to be disciplined to stick in your own lane and say, this is what I'm building, this is where I'm going, and I'm not going to go, oh, they're doing better, I'm going to go and try that, and then I'm going to go and try this, because you start at the bottom of the ladder every time you're jumping around. And then obviously commitment is going to be another one, but that kind of falls into the discipline. The commitment of it, you've got, or even the courage, it kind of falls into the same thing, because if you don't commit to it, you're not going to follow through and go all in and learn in depth. Like, when I first started, I was just a graphic designer learning graphic design, and obviously we built from there profiles, LinkedIn profiles, and now we're about to pivot again to become a design agency. We're about to do that in the next couple of months. And I think, it could be seen as a negative value, but I think it's important, is you've got to be selfish when you're building a business. And I don't mean that to be a negative thing, but I think, people say you can't pour from an empty cup. Do you know what I mean? You can't help anybody else unless you sort yourself out. And I think you've got to be selfish in that way, especially when you're trying to build a new business. You can't be giving away all your resources and all your time and everything that you've got. You can't be giving it away too early because your business will just fold very, very quickly. So I think, although that's, like I say, it's a negative value, but also at the same time, you can use it as a positive. Because now, like, to give you an idea, so when I first started, I was very selfish. I needed to get my businesses all about how do I do this? How do I get to the next level? Me. How do I get in front of people? But now I've got a team of designers, and one of them is in the Philippines, right? And I pay him £2,000 a month in the Philippines. Now he can send his kids to the best school. He can eat out every night. They can have, entertainment every night, the nicest house. He's cleared his debt almost. So for me being selfish, it's actually became a positive for somebody else's life, and that's what I like. And some people I see outsourcing to like India, Pakistan, they do it because they can pay very little money. And I don't do it like that. The reason I outsource to, I don't have all outsourcing to Philippines. It's just one of my designers. But the reason I have him is he's a very good designer. And I know that if I pay him what I would pay someone in the UK, it will make a massive impact on him and his family's life. And that's why I like doing it. So then that becomes selfless commitment at that point. You become selfless rather than selfish. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, I don't see it as a negative value. I just see it as part of commitment. You got to be committed to build your thing in order to later on be able to extend your hand, You can't pour into somebody else's cup if you don't have anything. You got to be committed to your journey, grow to be able to do it. And that's the way that I see it. And that's powerful. We work with people around the world, and one of the most fulfilling things for me as a business owner is seeing how their lives just get better. Of course we want our business to be flourishing in order for their lives to be better as well. But at the very beginning, we see we see different changes in their lives and positive changes, and I get where you come from. That's very, very powerful and very fulfilling.
Not only financially, but emotionally. That's the best when you see that.
Yes. Actually, our post producer is gonna see this story because he'll be touching this video. But his wife works with me. She's basically like the general manager or the admin manager in a real estate business that I have. And she was talking to me about her husband, and she said, no, he's going through some medical things, and we have to travel to the capital. They live in Bolivia, right? A country in South America. They have to travel to the capital to see a doctor because they couldn't find out what it was. And I think it was going through stress, anxiety, depression, somewhere along those lines. And I happened to ask her, and what does he do? And for a living, and she said, he works as a post producer, and he works for TV shows and all that. And what is he doing now? Apparently, he was without a job, and that was also contributing towards his aches. And we were able to bring him on the team. And probably 6 months after, or 5 months after, I asked her, how's your husband doing after working with us? Staying concentrated, and she said the aches are over. And that's very fulfilling. That's like, for us, that's like selling 1,000 t-shirts. Yes, it's very, when you're able to impact somebody's life that way, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, I think so. The direction I'm going with the business, obviously into the design agency, is it has an impact on 2 directions or 3 directions. So one, I can scale the business, which makes my life better. I can find really good designers in countries which are lower paid, but pay them extremely well. So what I would normally pay UK, which means their life is massively improving, like greatly. So like I said, I pay him just over 2K a month. A full-time nurse in the Philippines earns $400 a month. So I'm paying him like 6 times what a nurse would earn. And he works, part-time hours, and he's got like good family life. He's got time to do other clients if he wants. I've got no restrictions on that. So his life gets looked after. His family life improves. But with the design agency now, I want to make sure that, because I've got some really good designers, very, very good designers, I want to make sure that I can give a really good service to companies who need design. So then what we do then, we're impacting their business and their lives. We're lowering, because I can keep my costs relatively low, we can give them a better cost advantage compared to most big design agencies. They get quality of output. They can scale their business, which in turn helps their life, their family, their employees. So by us fixing us, this is what I mean. If you're selfless or selfish, that can be projected out to be selfless at that after, and it can impact so many more people. And that's where we're going next. Like what we do at the minute with profiles, it's one and done, one and done, one and done. And the problem with that is very clunky and it's very slow and it's not impacting people at the velocity I'd like to. So that's why we're going to be pivoting again soon.
To design. That's amazing. And just to finish off with PTSD, veterans, and your role in terms of serving this community, can you elaborate a little bit about the systems or the support systems that you have for these veterans and how you help them when it comes to PTSD?
Yeah, so I've only just recently started the YouTube channel, but the goal eventually, so I've got Dan, who's my hypnotherapist. I've connected with a few other therapists who do like EMDR, psychedelics, different backgrounds, psychologists. So I've connected with quite a few recently. And although the channel at the minute is, I can't do much at the moment because it's still growing. So this could be a year away before I get to the point where it needs to be. But the idea is, at the moment, is to get as many stories about PTSD through male PTSD, not females, because obviously females have got the support network they need, or, a lot more than men. But the reason I focus on men is because I can relate a lot more, because I didn't talk and I'm male, and I get the male psychology behind lack of communication. But at the moment, it's to get the stories onto the YouTube channel, grow that YouTube channel. Eventually, I will register as a charity, and I will probably start to focus on veterans because that is my background. So helping veterans, especially those on the street, because a lot of them get forgotten about. But then later on, further down the line, I want to start a membership community, but approach companies that will give discounts for members in my community. So it makes the cost of that membership way less than what they're saving from discounts. So I can start to build that. Then once that grows, then I want to then bring in fitness and nutrition specialists who can do monthly fitness programs or nutrition or, and stuff like that, and start to build it that way as well. Like I recently spoke to a friend of mine. He's doing something similar. Not the YouTube channel, but he's doing a military Facebook group, and he'll end up building a paid community. I'll start growing that, and we bounce ideas back and forth and come up with a few things that we can both implement, separate businesses, but the idea behind that then would eventually be, if it can grow big enough, you can go to somebody on the street and go, look, I'm going to pay 6 months in a hotel, get you cleaned up, give you a chance to go find a job, get your CV written for you, try and get you back. If you need a van, we can go lease a van so you can get a camper van, you got somewhere to stay just until you get yourself sorted. Do you know what I mean? So I know it's small. We couldn't go and say, here's a house, we're going to buy you a house, but at least we can get them off the street into something dry and warm and start getting them back into society. So it's a long way away at the moment. Yeah. You got to take small steps, and I don't necessarily think giving someone 100 grand is the answer. Do you know what I mean? You give someone 100 grand, they could be on drugs, they might be really struggling, they might be in debt. that money could go into their pocket straight out and they're no better off. So you're better off saying, well, here's a vehicle, let's get you off the street, get you warm, get your clothes, get your hair cut, get you showered, like I said, get your CV written properly, and then start getting you in for interviews and seeing if people can help them out. But I might even be big enough at that point to say, you're on the street, if you want to come and work for us, so, it depends how big it gets.
I love it.
I love it.
In many religions, they say that if you are able to convert one person into their God's kingdom, you'll be saved. So it's with one that you do it, and the fulfillment aspect of that is just incredible. In terms of kindness, I don't recall the name or the IG handle right now, but there's a person that does something similar, and then asks,
kindness acts.
Yeah, and it's so fulfilling. Small acts. Sometimes she does huge things of kindness, like building a house for somebody that he asked, wished for something, and the person wished for a house and had a story of why he wished for a house for his family, and the guy gave him a house. He does small, medium, large kindness acts, and it's so fulfilling. And that is like giving back to that community. And there's no one better to do it than an actual veteran that has gone through these post-traumatic syndromes and that understands what these people in the streets are feeling. That's powerful. For me, it's a very good experience. I've had a couple of talks with ex-militaries, and getting to know these stories and how they change lives is powerful. Darren, thank you so much for your time on the Values Driven Talks, and we hope to have a new episode with you coming soon as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren.
Cheers.